The man who taught a generation that nobody puts baby in a corner spent his final years ensuring the world understood a different truth, that the dance floor of the iconic 1987 film was not a stage of effortless romance, but a battlefield of discipline, fear, and barely contained fire. Before the curtain fell on his life, Patrick Swayze peeled back the glossy veneer of Dirty Dancing not with bitterness, but with a warrior's clarity. He wanted to correct the record. For decades, fans swooned over the electrifying chemistry between Johnny Castle and Baby Houseman, believing the magic was born from natural harmony. The reality, Swayze confessed, was far more complex, far more dangerous, and ultimately, far more human than anyone ever suspected. Beneath the simmering heat of that lakeside lodge lurked a pressure cooker of perfectionism, clashing temperaments, physical agony, and a secret truce that nearly shattered before it could soar. This is not the myth. This is the unvarnished testimony of a dancer who refused to let the truth take its final bow with him. To understand the chaos on set, one must first understand the man at its center. Patrick Swayze was not merely an actor who learned a few steps for a role. He was a classically trained weapon of discipline. Born in Houston to Patsy Swayze, a fiercely demanding choreographer, Patrick was forged in a crucible of plies and pirouettes from the age of 5. His mother didn't teach dance as an art form. She taught it as a survival tactic. She was known to strike her students with a wooden spoon to correct their posture, and her own son was not exempt. This rigorous, almost militaristic training instilled in Patrick a deep-seated belief that precision was the only path to excellence. Later, a devastating knee injury while playing football crushed his dreams of a sports career, but it also rerouted him permanently into the world of professional dance, including a stint with the prestigious Elliott Feld Ballet Company. By the time he arrived on the set of Dirty Dancing in the summer of 1986, Swayze was a man who had rebuilt his body and his ego through sheer stubborn will. He was also, by his own admission, a control freak who had little patience for amateurism. This was the powder keg waiting for a spark. The spark, of course, was Jennifer Grey. Long before they were Baby and Johnny, they had been co-stars on the set of the 1984 war film Red Dawn, and the experience had left both of them cold. Grey, the daughter of legendary Broadway actor Joel Grey, had grown up in the wings of the theater, but her acting style was instinctual, raw, and emotionally transparent. Swayze's approach was the opposite: calculated, physical, and locked behind a stoic exterior. When Grey learned that Swayze had been cast as a romantic lead in Dirty Dancing, her heart sank. According to her memoir, Out of the Corner, she was filled with dread. She remembered him as aloof and intimidating, a man who seemed to radiate a quiet judgment. The producers, however, were adamant. They needed a male lead who could dance with the power of a bull and the grace of a cat. Swayze was the only man for the job. In a last-ditch effort to salvage the project's chemistry, Swayze did something uncharacteristically vulnerable. Just before their screen test, he pulled Grey aside. He dropped the Johnny Castle swagger and spoke to her as Patrick. He offered a simple, sincere apology for the tension of their past and a plea for a fresh start. Grey later described that moment as the single reason she agreed to stay. But a single apology cannot erase a lifetime of habit. Once filming began at Lake Lure, North Carolina, and the Mountain Lake Hotel in Virginia, the fragile truce began to crack under the weight of brutal conditions and clashing artistic visions. The summer of 1986 was a scorcher, with humidity that made the air feel like wet velvet. The cast and crew worked 14-hour days, often in a converted barn that had no air conditioning. The iconic dance sequences required dozens of takes. For a perfectionist like Swayze, a misstep or a moment of off-timing was a professional insult. For Grey, who had no formal dance training, the pressure was paralyzing. She would often flub a move and then, out of sheer nervous energy, burst into uncontrollable giggles. This drove Swayze insane. In the documentary I Am Patrick Swayze, crew members recalled that the two would often retreat to opposite corners of the set between takes, refusing to speak. The air between them was thick and cold. Swayze felt Grey was being unprofessional. Grey felt Swayze was being a bully. The legendary Hungry Eyes montage, where Johnny teaches Baby the mambo in a steamy, intimate setting, was reportedly a nightmare to film because Gray kept laughing at Swayze's intensity and Swayze kept walking off the floor in frustration. What the audience perceived as raw, spontaneous desire was often the result of two people barely tolerating each other. Swayze later admitted in his memoir, The Time of My Life, that he channeled his real-life annoyance with Gray directly into his performance. When Johnny Castle snaps at Baby for being clumsy, that wasn't entirely acting. When Johnny's eyes burn with a frustrated intensity, that was Patrick fighting the urge to correct his partner's footwork for the 30th time. He confessed that he found Gray's emotional vulnerability exhausting, while she found his rigid discipline terrifying. This strange alchemical friction is what gave the film its unique voltage. They were not two lovers finding harmony. They were two opposing forces grinding against each other until they produced a spark. The dance floor became a neutral zone where their personal war was temporarily suspended and repurposed into art. But there was one sequence that required more than suspension of hostility. It required absolute, life-or-death trust. The climactic lift, the moment Johnny hoists Baby high above his head as "I've had the time of my life" swells, is one of the most iconic shots in cinema history. What the world didn't know for years, and what Swayze revealed before his death, was that the lift was a one-shot gamble performed under a cloak of terror and physical agony. Gray was terrified of heights and even more terrified of being dropped. She refused to rehearse the lift on dry land. For weeks, she and Swayze practiced the move in the safety of a lake, using the buoyancy of the water to simulate the catch. On the day of the shoot, with the floor dry and the stakes real, Gray was shaking. Swayze, meanwhile, was hiding a devastating secret. His body was falling apart. Years of dance, football, and a previous horse-riding accident had left his knees in ruins. During the filming of Dirty Dancing, he was nursing a torn ligament in one knee and a damaged cartilage in the other. He was in constant, excruciating pain. He wore a brace under his costume and iced his joints for hours after filming. He later revealed that he was taking heavy anti-inflammatory medication just to stand. The night of the final lift, the pressure was immense. The director, Emile Ardolino, knew he had only one or two takes before Swayze's knee would give out completely, or Gray's nerve would shatter. Swayze looked at Gray and dropped the act. He didn't give her a command or a critique. He simply said, "Trust me." It was the most vulnerable moment between them. She ran. He caught her, and for 2.5 seconds, they were suspended in midair. Two enemies united by a single desperate goal. When she came down, she was crying. He was wincing, but the shot was perfect. In that moment, the battle was over. Swayze later said that while they never became close friends, that lift forged a lifelong respect. He finally understood that her fear was not a weakness, but a source of her authenticity, and she finally understood that his rigidity was not cruelty, but a shield against his own physical decay. The magic of Dirty Dancing, he concluded, was not that it was easy, but that it was nearly impossible. In the years that followed, as the film became a global phenomenon, and Swayze battled his way through Ghost, Point Break, and his final fight with pancreatic cancer, he rarely spoke of the set with nostalgia. He spoke of it with a kind of exhausted pride. Before his death in September 2009, he gave a series of intimate interviews, collected in his memoir, and various documentary features, where he finally laid the truth bare. He wanted to dismantle the myth that the Dirty Dancing set was a dreamy, romantic escape. It was, he said, a beautiful disaster. It was a place where a man with broken knees taught a terrified actress to fly, where two people who could barely look at each other created a generation's definition of love. His final revelation was this: art is not born from comfort. It is born from conflict, from pain, from the desperate need to prove something to yourself and everyone else. The sweaty, tense, furious summer of 1986 was hell, but it was an honest hell. And because it was honest, the world believed every second of it. Patrick Swayze left the stage not as Johnny Castle, but as a warrior who finally admitted that the dance was never about the steps, it was about surviving the music.